Hi, I'm Samuel Thompson. My brother borrowed $50,000 from me and then vanished like smoke. Blocked my calls, moved addresses, acted like I never existed. For 2 years, I heard nothing. Then one day, I'm scrolling through social media, and there he is, standing in front of $1 million penthouse, champagne in hand, celebrating his self-made success. My money built that life. My trust funded his dreams while I worked double shifts just to stay afloat. But what he didn't know was that I'd been building something too. Not an empire, not a fortune, just a case, airtight, documented, undeniable. Want to know what happened when I showed up at his door with a court order and a lawyer? Let me tell you, that smug grin disappeared real fast. This isn't just about money anymore, it's about accountability. And some debts can't be ignored forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I hadn't been back to Portland in 3 years, didn't miss the rain or the gray skies that seemed to press down on everything like a wet blanket. The city felt smaller now, or maybe I'd just gotten used to living in places where people didn't know my name or my history. I pulled into the parking lot of Whitmore Associates, a boutique law firm tucked between a coffee roaster and a vintage bookstore in the Pearl District. The building was all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. The kind of place that screamed expensive but tried to look approachable. I cut the engine and sat there for a moment, hands still gripping the steering wheel. My phone buzzed. A text from my attorney, Jordan Whitmore. "Ready when you are. Conference room B." I pocketed the phone and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, dark circles under my eyes. 2 days of stubble. I looked like I felt, exhausted, angry, and running on fumes. But I'd come this far. No turning back now. Inside, the receptionist gave me a polite smile and gestured toward the hallway. I walked past framed diplomas and abstract art until I reached a glass-walled conference room where Jordan sat reviewing documents. She looked up when I entered. "Samuel, good to see you." "Wish I could say the same about the circumstances," I replied, taking a seat across from her. Jordan was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed, with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. She'd come highly recommended by a colleague who said she specialized in contract disputes and had a reputation for being relentless. "Before we proceed," she said, sliding a folder toward me, "I want to make sure you understand what we're walking into today." I opened it. Inside were copies of the loan agreement I'd drafted 3 years ago, bank statements showing the wire transfer of $50,000, text messages, emails, everything I'd kept as insurance when I handed over that money. "Your brother, Anthony White, signed this agreement," Jordan continued. "He acknowledged the loan, agreed to a repayment schedule, and provided his business as collateral if he defaulted. Which he did. 2 months after you transferred the funds, he stopped responding." I nodded. I knew all this. I'd lived it. "What you might not know," she said, leaning forward, "is that 6 months ago, Anthony registered a new LLC under a different name, Apex Ventures. He's been funneling income through it, likely to avoid creditors. Including you." My jaw tightened. "So he's been hiding money." "Actively concealing assets," Jordan corrected. "We've got bank records, business filings, even social media posts, showing him living well beyond what his disclosed income would support. The penthouse in the South Waterfront District? Purchased under the LLC. The Tesla? Leased through the same entity." She pulled out her laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen was a photo from Anthony's Instagram, posted just 2 weeks ago. He was standing on a rooftop terrace, city lights glittering behind him, holding a glass of something expensive. The caption read, "Self-made and loving every minute." I stared at it, feeling something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Self-made. With my money. "Here's what's going to happen," Jordan said, closing the laptop. "We filed a motion to compel asset disclosure. The judge granted it. Anthony is required to appear in court next week and provide a full accounting of his finances. If he refuses or lies, he'll be held in contempt. And if he shows up, then we prove he has the means to repay you and we get a judgment. With interest and legal fees, he'll owe you close to $75,000. I sat back, letting that sink in. $75,000, more than I'd lent him, but still a fraction of what he'd cost me. The sleepless nights. The second job I'd taken to cover bills. The trust I'd lost in people. "There's one more thing," Jordan said quietly. "Your brother isn't coming alone. He's bringing his wife, Abigail Anderson White. She's listed as co-owner of Apex Ventures." Abigail. I'd met her once, briefly, at a family gathering years ago. She'd seemed nice enough then, polite, well-dressed, the kind of person who smiled a lot but never said much. I wondered if she knew where the money for their lifestyle had come from, or if she cared. "When do we go?" I asked. "Court's at 2 this afternoon, but first I want to prep you. Anthony's attorney is going to try to paint you as vindictive, maybe even claim the loan was a gift. We need to be ready for that." I almost laughed. A gift. $50,000. Handed over because Anthony said he had a business opportunity that couldn't miss. He'd sat across from me at a diner in Northeast Portland, hands folded, eyes earnest, and promised me it was a sure thing. 6 months, he'd said. "I'll pay you back in 6 months with interest." That was 3 years ago. Jordan spent the next hour walking me through questions I might be asked. She was thorough, clinical, treating my anger like evidence to be cataloged and controlled. By the time we finished, it was nearly noon. I stepped outside for air, the cool drizzle hitting my face like tiny pinpricks. Across the street, a couple walked past with a stroller, laughing about something. Normal life. I'd forgotten what that felt like. My phone buzzed again, a message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Don't do this, Megashus. A. Anthony." Of course he had my number. Probably never deleted it, just stopped answering when I called. I didn't respond, just pocketed the phone and walked back inside. At 1:30, Jordan and I drove to the Multnomah County Courthouse, a hulking concrete structure that looked like it had been built to intimidate. Inside, the air smelled like floor wax and old paper. We passed through security and took the elevator to the 4th floor. Courtroom 4C was smaller than I expected. Wooden benches, fluorescent lights, a judge's bench that loomed over everything like a silent arbiter of fate. We took our seats on the left side. Jordan arranged her files with practiced precision. And then he walked in. Anthony looked good. Too good. Tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt, leather shoes that probably cost more than my rent. His hair was styled, his face clean-shaven, and he carried himself with the kind of confidence that comes from never facing consequences. Beside him was Abigail, dressed in a cream-colored blouse and black slacks, her blonde hair pulled into a low ponytail. She looked nervous, eyes darting around the room like she wasn't sure she belonged there. Anthony's attorney, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with silver hair, leaned over and whispered something. Anthony nodded, then glanced across the aisle. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he smiled. Not warmly, not apologetically. Just a faint, smug curl of his lips that said he thought this was all some kind of misunderstanding that would blow over. I didn't smile back. I just held his gaze until he looked away. The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Patricia Lang entered, a stern-looking woman in her 60s with short gray hair and a no-nonsense expression. She sat, adjusted her glasses, and opened the file in front of her. "Thompson versus White," she said. "Motion to compel financial disclosure. Let's begin." Judge Lang's voice was measured and deliberate, the kind that didn't waste syllables. She scanned the documents in front of her, occasionally glancing up at both sides of the courtroom. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, nodding toward Jordan, "your client alleges that Mr. Anthony White borrowed $50,000 under a signed agreement and has failed to repay. Is that correct?" Jordan stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We have the signed loan agreement, dated March 15th, 3 years ago, along with bank records showing the transfer of funds. Mr. White ceased all communication 2 months after receiving the money and has since made no effort to repay." The judge turned to Anthony's attorney. "Mr. Garrison, how does your client respond?" Leonard Garrison rose slowly, his movements deliberate. He had the air of someone who'd been in courtrooms longer than most people had been alive. "Your Honor," he began, voice smooth, "my client acknowledges that he received money from his brother. However, the characterization of this transaction as a loan is disputed. There was no formal contract reviewed by legal counsel, no notarization, and critically, no witnesses to the signing. This was a family matter, and my client believed it to be a gesture of support, not a legal obligation." I felt my hands clench into fists under the table. Jordan placed a hand on my forearm, a silent reminder to stay calm. Furthermore, Garrison continued, Mr. White has experienced significant financial hardship over the past 3 years. His initial business venture failed due to circumstances beyond his control. He's since rebuilt, yes, but suggesting he's hidden assets is both inflammatory and unsubstantiated. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Judge Lang made a note. Ms. Whitmore, you've requested full financial disclosure. On what grounds? Jordan stood again. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. White has been concealing income through a shell company, Apex Ventures, LLC. Public records show property acquisitions and vehicle leases inconsistent with his claimed financial difficulties. We believe a full disclosure will reveal his ability to repay the debt. Garrison didn't miss a beat. Your Honor, Apex Ventures is a legitimate business entity co-owned by Mr. White and his wife, Abigail Anderson White. It was formed after the alleged loan period and is entirely separate from the matter at hand. My client's current financial success should not be weaponized against him in what amounts to a family dispute. The judge leaned back in her chair. Mr. White, would you like to address the court? Anthony stood. He looked composed, almost rehearsed. Your Honor, I love my brother. I always have. When I came to him 3 years ago, I was desperate. I'd lost my job, and I had an opportunity to start something new. Samuel offered to help, and I was grateful. But we never discussed repayment terms in any formal sense. It was understood as family helping family. He paused, letting that sink in. I've struggled since then. My first business failed. I lost nearly everything. But I didn't give up. I worked hard, rebuilt, and yes, I found some success. But to suggest I've been hiding from my brother or avoiding responsibility is simply not true. I've tried to reach out multiple times. He's the one who cut off contact. I almost stood up. Jordan's hand tightened on my arm. Judge Land looked at me. Mr. Thompson, is that accurate? Did you cut off contact with your brother? Jordan answered before I could. Your Honor, my client attempted to contact Mr. White numerous times over a 6-month period following the loan. Phone calls, emails, text messages, all ignored. When Mr. White moved addresses without informing my client, communication became impossible. The claim that my client is responsible for the estrangement is demonstrably false. She pulled out a stack of printed emails and texts, handing copies to the bailiff. These communications are time-stamped and show a clear pattern of evasion. Garrison glanced at the papers, then back at the judge. Your Honor, my client changed addresses due to financial strain. He was not in a position to maintain contact while trying to stabilize his life. This is not evasion. It's survival. The room was silent for a moment. I could feel the weight of every word, every implication. Anthony was good. He'd always been good at this, at making himself look like the victim, at rewriting history so smoothly that even people who knew better started to doubt themselves. Judge Lang set down her pen. Here's what I'm seeing. We have a signed agreement, albeit informal. We have evidence of a financial transaction. We have disputed claims about intent and communication. What I don't have is clarity on Mr. White's current financial situation. She looked directly at Anthony. Mr. White, are you willing to provide a full financial disclosure voluntarily? Garrison stood before Anthony could answer. Your Honor, we object. Requiring my client to disclose personal financial information in what may not even be a legally enforceable debt is overreach. If Mr. Thompson believes he's owed money, he should pursue this through standard collections processes, not abuse the court's time. Jordan countered immediately. Your Honor, this isn't a collections matter. This is a contract dispute with significant evidence of bad faith. The disclosure is necessary to determine whether Mr. White has the means to satisfy the debt he signed for. Judge Lang tapped her fingers on the bench, clearly weighing the arguments. Finally, she spoke. I'm going to issue a temporary order. Mr. White, you are required to provide a preliminary financial statement within 10 business days. This will include bank account summaries, business income records, and asset declarations. If the statement supports your claim of financial hardship, we'll revisit the matter. If it shows otherwise, we'll proceed to a hearing on enforceability and repayment. Garrison shifted his weight. Your Honor, we'd like to request a delay. 10 days is insufficient for my client to compile. 10 days is more than adequate for preliminary documentation, the judge interrupted. If you need an extension, file a motion. But I'm not inclined to grant it without cause. She looked at both sides. Anything else? Jordan shook her head. Garrison reluctantly did the same. Then we're adjourned. The gavel came down. Anthony turned immediately to Garrison, whispering something urgent. Abigail sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. Jordan started packing her files. That went better than expected, she said quietly. We've got the disclosure order. Now we wait. I nodded, but I wasn't paying attention. I was watching Anthony as he stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked toward the exit. Just before he reached the door, he glanced back at me. This time, he wasn't smiling. The rain had picked up by the time we left the courthouse. Heavy, relentless, the kind that soaked through your jacket in seconds. Jordan and I stood under the awning watching the street turn into a river of brake lights and gray water. He's going to stall, I said. Jordan didn't disagree, most likely. But he's already on record now. If he delays or submits incomplete documents, it strengthens our case. And if he lies? Then we catch him in it. She adjusted her umbrella. Samuel, I know this feels slow, but we're building something airtight here. Trust the process. I nodded, though trust wasn't something I had much of anymore. We parted ways at the parking garage. I sat in my car for a while, engine off, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. My phone sat on the passenger seat, screen dark. No messages. No missed calls. Just silence. I thought about what Anthony had said in court, that I'd cut him off, that he'd tried to reach out. It was such a clean inversion of the truth that part of me almost admired the audacity. But the other part, the part that had worked 60-hour weeks to keep my head above water while he posted vacation photos, that part wanted to drive to his penthouse right then and make him look me in the eye. Instead, I drove to a diner on the east side, one of those 24-hour places with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting since morning. I ordered eggs and toast, barely touched either. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Lorraine, refilled my cup without asking. Rough day? Something like that. She didn't pry, just left the pot on the table and moved on to the next customer. I was staring out the window when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You're making a mistake. This will destroy our family. Call me, please. I stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. 20 minutes later, another message, this time from a number I recognized. My cousin, Mia Davis. Hey, heard about the court thing. Anthony's upset. Can we talk? I set the phone face down and finished my coffee. By the time I got back to my apartment, it was nearly 7. The place was small, a one-bedroom in southeast Portland with thin walls and a view of a parking lot. But it was mine, paid for with money I'd earned, not borrowed. I dropped my keys on the counter and noticed the blinking light on my answering machine. Yes, I still had a landline. Old habits. I hit play. Samuel, it's Mom. Her voice was tight, strained. Anthony called me. He's very upset about this court business. I don't understand why you couldn't work this out as a family. Please call me back. We need to talk about this. I deleted it. The next message was from my uncle, Joseph Taylor. Sam, I don't know what's going on between you and Anthony, but taking him to court seems extreme. He's family. Whatever happened, I'm sure you two can sort it out. Give me a call. Delete. The third message was silent for a few seconds, then Anthony's voice, low and edged with something I couldn't quite place. You really want to do this? Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you. Click. I stood there in the dim kitchen, staring at the machine. The red light stopped blinking. They were circling the wagons. Of course they were. Anthony had always been good at that, at making himself the sympathetic one, at rallying people to his side. And I was the bad guy now, the one dragging family business into court, airing dirty laundry, refusing to let things go. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the small table by the window. Outside, the rain continued. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Jordan. Check your email. Something just came through. I opened my laptop. There, in my inbox, was a message forwarded from Jordan. The subject line read, "Preliminary Financial Disclosure, Anthony White." My pulse quickened. I opened the attachment. It was a PDF, hastily formatted, barely 3 pages long. Bank statements with most of the details redacted. A single-page summary claiming total assets of $18,000 and monthly expenses exceeding income. At the bottom, a note from Garrison's office. Client submits this preliminary disclosure in good faith. Full documentation to follow pending review. I called Jordan immediately. "This is garbage," I said. "I know," she replied, calm as ever, "which is exactly what we wanted." "What do you mean?" "He's lying, Samuel, and he's doing it in writing, under court order. This gives us leverage." "How?" "Because I already have the real numbers." There was a pause, then the sound of papers shuffling. "I hired a forensic accountant 3 days ago." Quiet, off the books, just to see what we could find. Apex Ventures filed a business tax return last year, showing gross revenue of $412,000. Anthony's personal accounts show regular transfers from the LLC, including a $70,000 deposit 2 months ago. I sat back, letting that sink in. He just committed perjury. Not quite. He was clever. Notice he said preliminary and good faith. But yes, this is materially misleading. And when we go back to court, we're going to shred it. When's the next hearing? 2 weeks. Judge Lang scheduled a follow-up. I'll file a motion to compel full disclosure with the forensic report attached. Anthony's going to have to explain the discrepancies. And if he doesn't, then he's held in contempt, fines, possibly jail time. Judges don't like being lied to. I felt something shift in my chest. Not quite relief, but close. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't chasing shadows. I had him. "Jordan," I said quietly, "thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This is just round 1. We hung up. I sat there in the dark apartment, staring at the financial disclosure on my screen. $18,000. He must have thought I was stupid, or desperate enough to take whatever scraps he threw my way. But I wasn't that person anymore. I opened a new document and started writing. Not for the court, not for Jordan, just for me. A timeline. Every conversation, every promise, every lie. I wrote until my hands ached, until the words blurred together, until the rain finally stopped and the city outside my window began to wake up. Somewhere across town, Anthony was probably sleeping soundly in his $1 million penthouse, convinced he'd gotten away with it. He had no idea what was coming. The next 2 weeks moved like molasses. Every morning I woke up expecting something. A call from Jordan, another message from Anthony, some sign that the wheels were turning. Instead, there was just silence and the slow grind of waiting. I kept working my 2 jobs. Days at a logistics company downtown, pushing papers and managing shipments. Nights at a warehouse in North Portland. Inventory control. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills. The routine kept me sane, gave me something to focus on besides the knot of anger sitting in my chest. On day 6, my mother called again. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Samuel," she said, her voice softer than the last message, "please talk to me. I don't understand what's happening between you and your brother." I sat on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear, trying to find words that wouldn't sound bitter. "Mom, did Anthony tell you why I took him to court?" "He said there was a misunderstanding about money, that you lent him something and now you're demanding it back at the worst possible time." "A misunderstanding," I repeated. "He borrowed $50,000, Mom. Signed an agreement. Promised to pay me back in 6 months. That was 3 years ago. He's been ignoring me ever since." There was a long pause. $50,000? Yes. Another pause, longer this time. "Samuel, I had no idea it was that much. Anthony told me it was a few thousand, something to help him get started." I closed my eyes. Of course he did. "He lied to you, Mom, just like he's lying to the court. He's living in a penthouse, driving a luxury car, posting about his success on social media, all while claiming he's broke and can't pay me back." She didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice was smaller. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. I just need you to understand that I didn't do this to hurt him. I did it because he left me no choice. He's still your brother. And I'm still out $50,000 that I couldn't afford to lose." The conversation ended shortly after that. No resolution, no apology, just the uncomfortable silence of a family fracturing along lines that had probably been there all along. 3 days before the hearing, Jordan called. "We have a problem." My stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "Garrison filed a motion this morning. They're claiming undue emotional distress. Anthony's arguing that the court proceedings have caused him severe psychological harm, anxiety, depression, the works. He submitted a letter from a therapist." "You're kidding." "I wish I was." "They're asking the judge to dismiss the case on the grounds that pursuing it further would be harmful to Anthony's mental health." I stood up from my desk at work, walked outside into the cold air. That's absurd. He can't just claim he's too fragile to face consequences. He can try. And judges take mental health seriously, especially in family disputes. We need to be ready to counter this. How? By showing that his claims don't match his behavior, the social media posts, the business activity, the property purchases. If he's too distressed to appear in court, he's too distressed to run a company and live a luxury lifestyle. We'll expose the contradiction. What do you need from me? Everything you have. Every post, every photo, every public record. I want to build a timeline that shows exactly how he's been living while claiming poverty and now mental anguish. I spent the next 2 days combing through Anthony's digital footprint. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, even his business website. Every smiling photo at a restaurant, every check-in at a resort, every humble brag post about success and gratitude. I screenshotted everything, organized it by date, cross-referenced it with the timeline of his supposed financial hardship. It was damning. And infuriating. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation I'd ever had with Anthony. Looking for the moment it all went wrong. Wondering if I'd missed some sign that he was always going to do this. My phone buzzed at 2 a.m., a text from Mia. I talked to Mom. She told me about the $50,000. "I'm sorry, Sam, I didn't know." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Thanks." Anthony's been telling everyone you're trying to ruin him. But if what Mom said is true, that's not fair. It's true. Then I'm on your side. For what it's worth. It was worth more than she probably knew. The Multnomah County Courthouse looked even more imposing the second time. Gray clouds hung low over the city, threatening rain but never quite delivering. Jordan met me on the steps, carrying 2 briefcases and wearing an expression that meant business. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." Inside, courtroom 4C was more crowded than before. I spotted a few familiar faces in the gallery. Mia, sitting near the back, gave me a small nod. My Uncle Joseph was there too, looking uncomfortable in a suit that didn't quite fit. And then there was my mother, sitting alone in the 3rd row, hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. Anthony arrived 10 minutes late. He looked different. Worn down. His suit was still expensive, but somehow hung differently on him, like he'd lost weight or stopped caring. Abigail walked beside him, one hand on his arm, guiding him like he might collapse without support. It was a performance. I could see that immediately. But it was a good one. Judge Lang entered, and we all stood. She took her seat, adjusted her glasses, and opened the file with the kind of efficiency that suggested she'd already made up her mind about something. "Mr. Garrison," she began, "I've reviewed your motion regarding Mr. White's mental health. Before we proceed, I'd like to hear directly from your client. Mr. White, can you explain to the court why you believe continuing these proceedings would cause you undue harm?" Anthony stood slowly. He looked at the judge, then briefly at me, then back to the judge. "Your Honor, the last 2 weeks have been the hardest of my life. I haven't been able to sleep. I've had panic attacks. My therapist says I'm showing signs of severe anxiety disorder, possibly PTSD from the stress of this legal action." He paused, his voice breaking slightly. "I love my brother. I never wanted things to get this far. But being accused of lying, of hiding money, of being a bad person, it's destroying me. I just want this to end." Abigail reached over and squeezed his hand. A few people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. Judge Lang made a note. "Ms. Whitmore, your response?" Jordan stood. "Your Honor, we sympathize with anyone experiencing mental health difficulties. However, we believe Mr. White's claims are inconsistent with his recent behavior and are being used as a litigation tactic, rather than a genuine expression of distress. She opened her laptop and pulled up a presentation. If I may, I'd like to walk the court through Mr. White's public social media activity over the past 14 days, the same period during which he claims to have been suffering severe psychological harm. Garrison stood. Objection, Your Honor. My client's social media is not relevant to his current mental state. It's directly relevant, Jordan countered. If Mr. White is too distressed to participate in court proceedings, that distress should be evident in other areas of his life. Judge Lang considered this. I'll allow it. Proceed, Ms. Whitmore. Jordan pulled up the first image. Anthony at a steakhouse, wine glass raised, caption reading, celebrating small wins. Date stamped 4 days ago. Next image. Anthony on a hiking trail, arms spread wide, mountains in the background. Grateful for this view and this life. 3 days ago. Next. Anthony and Abigail at what looked like a gallery opening, both dressed formally, smiling. Supporting local artists tonight. 2 days ago. Jordan let each image sit on the screen for a few seconds. Your Honor, these posts were made during the exact time period Mr. White claims he was experiencing debilitating anxiety and panic attacks. Additionally, we have records showing Mr. White attended multiple business meetings, signed contracts for new ventures, and made substantial purchases, including a $15,000 deposit on a luxury vehicle. The room was silent. Anthony's face had gone pale. Furthermore, Jordan continued, the therapist letter submitted by Mr. Garrison is dated only 3 days ago. Mr. White had one session with this therapist, a single consultation, before obtaining a letter diagnosing severe anxiety. We believe this was arranged specifically for this hearing. Garrison stood quickly. Your Honor, my client sought help when he recognized he was struggling. The timing doesn't invalidate his experience. Judge Lang held up a hand. Mr. White, did you have a prior relationship with this therapist before last week? Anthony hesitated. No, Your Honor, but I was referred by a friend who said she was very good. And in one session, she diagnosed you with PTSD? She said I was showing signs consistent with trauma response. The judge leaned back. Mr. Garrison, I appreciate your client's position, but I'm not inclined to dismiss these proceedings based on the evidence presented. If Mr. White is genuinely struggling, I encourage him to continue therapy. However, this case will move forward. Garrison's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Understood, Your Honor. Judge Lang looked at both sides. Now, regarding the financial disclosure. Ms. Whitmore, you filed a supplemental motion with the forensic accounting report. Walk me through it. Jordan pulled up another document. Your Honor, our forensic accountant reviewed publicly available business filings, tax records, and financial transactions related to Apex Ventures, LLC. The findings directly contradict Mr. White's preliminary disclosure. She highlighted key sections. Mr. White claimed total assets of $18,000. Our analysis shows liquid assets exceeding $200,000 when accounting for business accounts, investment portfolios, and real estate equity. Mr. White claimed monthly expenses exceeding income. Our analysis shows net monthly income of approximately $12,000. Anthony's attorney was already shaking his head. Your Honor, those are business assets, not personal. My client doesn't have unfettered access to LLC funds. He's the majority owner and sole signatory on the accounts. Jordan shot back. He has complete control. Judge Lang studied the report. Mr. White, is this information accurate? Anthony looked at Garrison, who whispered something. Then he turned back to the judge. Some of those numbers are inflated. The business has debts, obligations, it's not all available cash. But you do have access to more than $18,000 in assets. A long pause. Yes, Your Honor. The judge set down her pen. Mr. White, your preliminary disclosure was materially misleading. Whether intentional or not, it wasted the court's time and undermined your credibility. She looked at Jordan. Ms. Whitmore, what are you seeking? Full repayment of the loan, $75,000 including interest and legal fees, plus court costs. We're also requesting a payment schedule with secured collateral to ensure compliance. Judge Lang nodded slowly. Here's my ruling. Mr. White, you are ordered to repay Mr. Thompson the principal amount of $50,000 plus accrued interest at the rate specified in the original agreement. Additionally, you will cover Mr. Thompson's legal fees and court costs. Total judgment, $72,000. Anthony's face went white. You have 90 days to arrange payment or propose a court-approved payment plan with collateral. Failure to comply will result in asset seizure and potential contempt charges. Am I clear? Yes, Your Honor, Garrison said quietly. The gavel came down. I sat there, not quite believing it was over. Jordan was already gathering her files, a satisfied look on her face. Across the aisle, Anthony stood motionless, staring at nothing. As we filed out, I felt my mother's hand on my shoulder. I turned. I'm sorry, she said simply. I should have believed you. I didn't have words for that. Just nodded. Outside, the rain had finally started. Light, steady, washing everything clean. $72,000. The number sat in my head like a stone. Not quite real yet, but solid enough to feel the weight of it. I'd won. Legally, officially, undeniably. But winning in court and actually getting paid were two very different things. Jordan and I stood under the courthouse awning, watching the rain come down harder now, turning the streets into mirrors. He'll try to avoid payment, she said matter of fact. They always do. We need to be ready to enforce the judgment. How long do we have? 90 days. If he doesn't pay or propose an acceptable plan by then, we file for asset seizure. But honestly, Samuel, I wouldn't wait that long. We should start tracking his assets now. Make sure he doesn't try to move money or dissolve the LLC. I nodded, still processing. What do you need from me? Keep monitoring his activity, business filings, property records, anything that suggests he's trying to hide assets. And let me know immediately if he contacts you. We parted ways. I drove home through the rain, my windshield wipers barely keeping up. The apartment felt different when I walked in. Lighter somehow, like something heavy had been lifted from the air. I made coffee, sat at my small kitchen table, and opened my laptop. Time to do what Jordan suggested. I started with the Oregon Secretary of State website, searching for any recent filings related to Apex Ventures. Nothing in the past week. That was good. Meant he hadn't tried to dissolve it yet. Next, I checked property records. The penthouse in South Waterfront was still listed under the LLC. No transfer notices, no sale listings, also good. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have. I logged into an old shared cloud account that Anthony and I had set up years ago for family photos. We'd both forgotten about it, apparently, because it was still active. And when I opened it, I found something I wasn't expecting. A folder labeled Apex Financials Private. My hand hovered over the mouse. This was probably illegal, definitely unethical, but I clicked anyway. Inside were spreadsheets, detailed financial projections, investor decks, bank statements going back 2 years. I scrolled through, my pulse quickening with each page. Apex Ventures wasn't just successful, it was thriving. Monthly revenue had grown from $30,000 to over $60,000 in the past year. There were contracts with major clients, subscription services, consulting fees. And in a subfolder labeled Personal, I found something even more interesting. A document titled Asset Protection Strategy. I opened it. It was a memo, apparently written by some financial advisor, outlining ways to shield personal wealth from potential creditors and legal liabilities. The recommendations included transferring assets to Abigail's name, establishing offshore accounts, and creating subsidiary LLCs to obscure ownership. And at the bottom, a handwritten note in Anthony's handwriting, implement by end of Q2. Priority, protect against S. Me. I sat back, staring at the screen. He'd been planning this, not just avoiding payment, but actively strategizing how to make sure I could never collect. Even before the court hearing, he'd been 3 steps ahead. Or so he thought. I took screenshots of everything. Every spreadsheet, every contract, every page of that asset protection memo. Then I forwarded them to Jordan with a simple message. Found something. Call me. She called within 5 minutes. Where did you get this? Her voice was sharp, focused. Old shared cloud account. We both had access. I didn't hack anything. Good. Because this is gold, Samuel. He's not just hiding assets, he's documenting his intent to do so. This memo alone could get him held in contempt. What's our next move? I'm filing an emergency motion first thing tomorrow morning. We're going to ask the judge to freeze all of Anthony's accounts and assets pending full payment. With this evidence, she'll grant it. And then? Then we wait for him to realize he's trapped. I hung up and sat in the quiet apartment. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city was dark except for scattered lights and windows, people living their lives, unaware of the small war being waged in courtrooms and cloud storage folders. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You went through my files. That's illegal. I'm reporting this to the police and my attorney. You've crossed a line." Anthony. He must have gotten a notification when I accessed the shared account. I typed back. The account was shared. I had legitimate access. "And everything I found is going to the court tomorrow." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "You're destroying me. I hope you're happy." I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me, a small part, felt something like guilt. This was my brother. We'd grown up together, shared holidays, knew each other's secrets. But then I remembered the $50,000. The 2 years of silence. The lies in court. The asset protection memo, with my initial at the bottom. I deleted the message and put my phone on silent. The next morning, Jordan filed the emergency motion. By noon, we were back in front of Judge Lang. This time, the courtroom was nearly empty. Just us, Garrison, Anthony, and a court reporter. Judge Lang reviewed the documents quickly. When she got to the asset protection memo, her expression hardened. "Mr. White," she said, her voice cold, "did you write this note at the bottom of this document?" Anthony looked at Garrison, who gave a barely perceptible nod. "Yes, Your Honor. But it was just preliminary planning. I never actually implemented any of those strategies." The date on this memo is 3 weeks ago. The court issued its judgment 5 days ago. You were planning to hide assets before you even knew the outcome of this case. Your Honor, I was protecting my business interests. That's not illegal. It is when those interests are being used to avoid a legitimate debt. She looked at Jordan. Motion granted. All accounts and assets registered to Anthony White or Apex Ventures, LLC, are frozen effective immediately pending satisfaction of the judgment. Mr. White, you have 30 days to arrange payment. If you fail to do so, I will authorize seizure and liquidation of assets. Garrison stood. Your Honor, that's extremely punitive. My client needs access to business accounts to operate his company. Then perhaps your client should have considered that before attempting to hide assets from this court. 30 days, Mr. Garrison. Make it happen. The gavel came down. Anthony didn't look at me as we left. He just walked out, shoulders slumped, Abigail trailing behind him looking shell-shocked. Jordan and I stood in the hallway. That was faster than I expected, I said. She's angry. Judges don't like being played. And that memo was basically a confession. He's gonna have to pay now. There's no way around it. What if he doesn't have the cash? Then we take the penthouse, the car, whatever we need to satisfy the judgment. It's not ideal, but it's legal. I nodded, trying to process the reality of it. I was actually going to get my money back. After 3 years, after everything, I was going to win. That night, I got a call from my mother. Samuel, please. You have to stop this. You're going to bankrupt your brother. Mom, he did this to himself. He made a mistake. People make mistakes. You're family. Family forgives. Family also doesn't steal $50,000 and then lie about it in court. There was a long silence. Then, quietly, what do you want me to say? I don't want you to say anything. I just want you to understand that I didn't start this. But I'm going to finish it. She hung up without another word. 2 days later, Garrison called Jordan. They wanted to negotiate a settlement. Anthony would pay $40,000 immediately and the rest in monthly installments over 2 years, secured by a lien on the penthouse. Jordan called me. It's not the full amount up front, but it guarantees payment. What do you think? I thought about it. $40,000 now would cover most of what I'd lost. The rest would come eventually, and if he defaulted, I'd get the property. Take it, I said. I'm tired of fighting. The settlement was finalized a week later. The $40,000 hit my account on a Tuesday morning. I stared at the balance on my phone, watching the number sit there like it might disappear if I looked away. It didn't. That afternoon, I paid off the credit card debt I'd accumulated covering bills after the loan. I put some in savings. And then I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I took a day off work and drove to the coast. The Oregon coast in early spring is cold and gray and beautiful. I walked along Cannon Beach, hands in my pockets, watching the waves crash against Haystack Rock. Families played in the sand despite the wind. A couple walked past holding hands, laughing about something I couldn't hear. I sat on a piece of driftwood and pulled out my phone. There were no messages, no calls, just the sound of the ocean and the gulls overhead. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt something close to peace. But I also knew this wasn't really over. Anthony still owed me $32,000. And people like him, people who'd spent years building justifications for their choices, they didn't just accept defeat and move on. They waited, they planned, they looked for angles, and somewhere in Portland, in a frozen penthouse with frozen accounts, my brother was doing exactly that. The $40,000 sat in my account for exactly 3 days before things started unraveling again. It began with a letter, not an email, not a text, but an actual physical letter delivered to my apartment by certified mail. I signed for it on a Thursday morning, the envelope thick and official-looking, with a law firm's return address I didn't recognize. Inside was a notice of appeal. Anthony was challenging the judgment. His new attorney, someone from a bigger firm in downtown Portland, argued that the court had erred in freezing his assets, that the forensic accounting had been conducted without proper authorization, and that I had obtained evidence illegally by accessing the shared cloud account. I called Jordan immediately. "They're grasping," she said after I read her the filing. "This is a delay tactic. Appeals take months, sometimes years. He's trying to tie this up in legal process so he doesn't have to pay the rest." "Can he do that? He already paid $40,000. The settlement agreement requires the remaining payments, but if the appeal succeeds, the original judgment could be overturned, and theoretically he could argue for the return of what he's already paid. My stomach turned. "You're telling me I might have to give the money back?" "It's unlikely, but it's possible, which is why we need to fight this appeal hard and fast." She paused. "There's something else." The new firm he hired, Blackstone and Associates. They specialize in asset protection and litigation defense for high-net-worth individuals. They're expensive, really expensive. So where's he getting the money to pay them if his accounts are frozen? Good question. I'm going to file a motion to compel disclosure of his legal funding sources. If someone's bankrolling this defense, we need to know who. 2 days later, I found out. I was leaving my night shift at the warehouse when I spotted a black Mercedes parked across the street, engine running, headlights on. The driver's side window rolled down and a woman's voice called out, "Samuel Thompson?" I stopped, wary. Who's asking? The door opened and a woman stepped out. She was in her 50s, dressed in an expensive coat, her dark hair pulled back severely. She had the kind of face that looked like it smiled rarely and meant it even less. "My name is Vivienne Cross. I'm Anthony's mother-in-law. We need to talk." I'd never met Abigail's mother, but I'd heard about her. Old money from Lake Oswego. The kind of family that summered in the San Juans and wintered in Scottsdale. The kind of people who saw problems as things you threw money at until they disappeared. "I don't think we have anything to discuss," I said, turning toward my car. "I'm the one paying for Anthony's legal defense," she said sharply, "so yes, we do." That stopped me. I turned back. "Why would you do that?" She walked closer, her heels clicking on the wet pavement. "Because my daughter loves him. And because you're trying to destroy a good man over a personal grudge." A personal grudge? I felt heat rising in my chest. He borrowed $50,000 and refused to pay it back. Money my daughter and I both offered to help him repay if you'd been reasonable. But you weren't interested in a solution. You wanted blood. I wanted what I was owed. You wanted revenge. Her voice was cold, clinical. You dragged him through court, humiliated him publicly, froze his business accounts. Do you have any idea what that's done to him, to my daughter? I stared at her. Do you have any idea what he did to me? I worked 2 jobs for 3 years to make up for what he took. I called, I texted, I tried everything to work this out before going to court. He ignored me, he lied, he tried to hide his money. Vivienne's expression didn't change. That shared cloud account you accessed, my attorneys tell me that was illegal. You violated his privacy. It was a shared account. I had legitimate access. That's debatable, and it's exactly the kind of thing that could get this entire judgment thrown out. She paused, letting that sink in. I'm here to make you an offer. Drop the appeal, release the asset freeze, and accept a structured settlement of $25,000 paid over 5 years. In exchange, we'll release you from any liability regarding the cloud account access. I'm already owed $32,000, plus he's supposed to pay it over 2 years. Why would I take less money over more time? Because if you don't, we'll drag this through appeals for the next 3 years. We'll file countersuit for your illegal access to his files. We'll depose everyone you know, audit your finances, make this so expensive and exhausting that even if you win, you'll wish you'd never started. She stepped closer. I have resources you can't imagine, Mr. Thompson. I will bury you in legal fees and procedural motions until you're bankrupt. Or you can take the offer and walk away. I looked at her for a long moment. No. Her eyebrows raised slightly. Excuse me? I said no. You don't get to threaten me into taking a worse deal because you have money. That's not how this works. That's exactly how this works, she said quietly. Money is power, and you don't have any. Maybe not, but I have the truth, and a judge who's already ruled in my favor. So take your offer and your threats and get off my property. She studied me, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled, thin and humorless. You're going to regret this. She walked back to her Mercedes and drove away. I stood there in the parking lot, my hands shaking, not from fear but from anger. These people, Anthony, Vivienne, their whole circle, they thought everything could be bought or buried. They thought persistence and truth didn't matter if you had enough money to make someone tired of fighting. But they didn't know me. I called Jordan from my car. Anthony's mother-in-law just tried to bribe me into dropping the case. Did you record it? No, should I have? Next time, yes, but it doesn't matter. This actually helps us. If they're this desperate to settle, it means they're scared. The appeal is weak and they know it. She said they'd bury me in legal fees. They'll try, but here's the thing, Samuel. You've already won. The judgment stands unless they can prove significant legal error. Accessing a shared account you had legitimate credentials for? That's not illegal. It might be ethically gray, but it's not criminal. Their appeal has almost no chance of success. So what do? We file our response to the appeal. We document Vivienne's attempt to intimidate you. And we wait for the appellate court to laugh them out of the room. 3 weeks later, we got our answer. The Court of Appeals declined to hear the case. The original judgment stood. Jordan called me with the news. It's over. They have no more legal options. Anthony has to pay or face asset seizure. I sat down, feeling something like relief but also exhaustion. When? He has 14 days to make the first installment payment per the settlement agreement. If he misses it, we can file for immediate seizure of the penthouse. And if Vivienne keeps funding his resistance, then we take the penthouse and sell it. The court doesn't care where his money comes from. He either pays or he loses his assets. Those are the only options now. That night I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Not quite victory, but close. A sense that maybe, finally, this nightmare was ending. But I was wrong. On day 13, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Samuel. It was Anthony's voice, but different, quieter, tired. Can we talk? In person? Why? Because I need you to understand something. And I can't do it over the phone. Every instinct told me to say no, but curiosity won. Where? There's a coffee shop on Hawthorne. Palio, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., just you and me. I hung up without answering, but I knew I'd go. The next morning I arrived at Palio 15 minutes early. It was a small place, all reclaimed wood and Edison bulbs, the kind of carefully curated Portland aesthetic that tried very hard to look effortless. I ordered black coffee and sat by the window. Anthony walked in at exactly 9. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him. His face was drawn, shadows under his eyes, his clothes rumpled. He ordered something, I didn't catch what, and sat down across from me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I'm not here to ask you to drop the case, he said finally. I know you won't. Then why are you here? He stared into his cup. Do you remember when Dad died? The shift in topic caught me off guard. Yeah. You were overseas, military deployment. You couldn't make it back for the funeral. I know. I was there, gave the eulogy, handled all the arrangements. And the whole time, all I could think was that you got out. You left. You didn't have to watch him waste away, didn't have to make the hard decisions, didn't have to be the one holding everything together. He looked up at me. I resented you for that, for leaving, for making me be the responsible one. I didn't leave to avoid responsibility, Anthony. I left because staying here meant becoming someone I didn't want to be. I know that now, he rubbed his face. When I asked you for that money, I was desperate. The business I'd started failed. Vivienne was pressuring Abigail to leave me. I felt like I was drowning, and you were my only lifeline. So you lied to me? No. I mean, yes, eventually. But not at first. I really believed I'd pay you back. I had a plan, investors who seemed solid, projections that made sense. And then it all fell apart. The investors backed out, the market shifted, and suddenly I owed you $50,000 I didn't have. So you ghosted me. I panicked. I thought if I just ignored it long enough, if I could build something new and successful, I could pay you back with interest and we'd laugh about it someday. He laughed bitterly. Stupid, right? Yeah, it was. He nodded. And then Vivienne stepped in, gave me capital to start Apex. Told me to forget about the debt, that family loans weren't real obligations. And I let myself believe her because it was easier than facing what I'd done to you. I sipped my coffee, waiting. I'm sorry, he said. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know you've spent 3 years suffering because of me. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. Why tell me this now? Because tomorrow I'm making the payment, all of it, $32,000. Vivienne's giving me the money as a loan. I'll spend the next decade paying her back instead of you, but at least it'll be over between us. He stood up. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to believe me, but I needed to say it, face to face, brother to brother. He walked out before I could respond. I sat there for a long time, staring at my empty cup. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, triumphant. I'd won. I was getting my money back. But mostly I just felt tired. The next day the payment came through, $32,000, transferred from an account registered to Vivienne Cross. Jordan called to confirm. It's done, she said. You're whole again. Congratulations. Thanks. You don't sound happy. I don't know what I sound like. She was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, you did the right thing. You stood up for yourself when most people would have just accepted the loss. That takes courage. After we hung up, I opened my banking app and looked at the balance. $72,000. Everything I was owed, plus interest and fees. I should have felt relief, closure, victory. Instead, I felt empty. That night, I drove to the coast again. Same beach, same driftwood, same sound of waves against rock. But something had shifted. The anger that had fueled me for 3 years was gone, burned away by the long grind of legal battles and depositions and frozen accounts. And what was left was just a quiet sadness for something that couldn't be fixed with money or judgments. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Anthony. I accept your apology. I don't know if we can ever be brothers again, but I accept it. I hit send before I could overthink it. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Thank you, that means more than you know. I put the phone away and watched the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold. Somewhere behind me, a family was packing up their beach gear, kids laughing, parents calling out reminders about forgotten toys. Normal life, going on all around me, like it always had. And for the first time in 3 years, I thought maybe I could find my way back to that. Not to who I was before Anthony took the money, but to someone new. Someone who'd fought for what they were owed and won, but also someone who could let go of the anger and move forward. The ocean kept rolling in, indifferent and eternal. And I kept breathing. The money sat in my account for 2 weeks before I realized something was wrong. Not wrong with the payment itself, that had cleared, posted, become real, but wrong with me. I'd spent 3 years fighting for this moment, imagining how it would feel to finally be made whole, to have justice served, to watch Anthony face consequences for what he'd done. And now that it was over, I felt nothing. Just a vast, echoing emptiness where the anger used to be. I went to work, came home, ate meals I didn't taste, slept fitlessly. The rhythm of my life continued, but it felt mechanical, like I was going through motions without understanding why. On a Friday afternoon, I got a call from Jordan. Samuel, we need to talk. Something's come up. My stomach tightened. What now? Can you come to my office? I'd rather explain in person. An hour later, I was sitting across from her desk, watching her pull up documents on her laptop with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I got a call this morning from the Oregon Department of Revenue," she began. "They're conducting an audit of Apex Ventures, LLC. Apparently, there are some irregularities in their tax filings over the past 3 years." "What kind of irregularities?" "The kind that suggest significant underreporting of income. We're talking potential tax fraud, Samuel. And here's where it gets interesting." She turned the laptop toward me. "The audit was triggered by an anonymous tip filed 6 months ago, before your lawsuit even went to court." I stared at the screen. "Who filed it?" "Samuel," she said quietly. "I wondered when you'd figure it out." I sat down on the opposite end of the bench. Figure what out? That I was the one who filed the tip, that I'd been trying to stop Anthony from the beginning. I stared at her. "Why?" She looked out at the water, her expression distant. "Because 3 years ago, when Anthony borrowed that money from you, he told me it was for a business opportunity. He showed me projections, plans, everything. It seemed legitimate, and then the money disappeared." "Disappeared?" "He didn't invest it in any business. He gambled it. Every penny. Lost it all in 2 weeks at a casino in Washington." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "When I confronted him, he begged me not to tell you. Said he'd find a way to pay you back, that it was just bad luck, that it would never happen again." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "He gambled away my $50,000. That's what I wanted to ask you." The tip included detailed financial records, internal documents, things that only someone with inside access would have. It wasn't you, was it? "No. I didn't even know about Apex until after I filed the lawsuit." Jordan leaned back. "Then, someone else wanted Anthony investigated. Someone who knew what he was doing and wanted him caught." "Abigail?" "Maybe. Or someone else close to the business. The point is, this audit could uncover a lot more than unpaid taxes. If Anthony's been fraudulently reporting income, it could affect everything. The settlement, the asset freeze, even what he owes you." "How?" "If the state determines he owes substantial back taxes and penalties, they get paid first. Before creditors, before settlements, before anything. You might have gotten your $72,000. But if he owes the government more than his assets can cover, you could end up being the last person who actually got paid." I processed that. So I got lucky. Very lucky. If Vivienne hadn't funded that final payment, you'd still be waiting in line behind the IRS. She paused. "But there's something else. The documents included in that anonymous tip? They match some of the files you found in the shared cloud account. Same spreadsheets, same internal memos." "I didn't file any tip." "I believe you, which means someone else had access to those same files. Someone who wanted Anthony taken down." I thought about that for a moment. "Can you find out who filed the tip?" "It's anonymous for a reason, but I have a friend at the Revenue Department who might be able to tell me when it was filed and what exactly was included. Give me a few days." I left her office with more questions than answers. Who else would want to destroy Anthony? And why do it anonymously instead of confronting him directly? 3 days later, Jordan called again. "I found something. The tip was filed on March 3rd, 6 months ago. It included tax documents, internal financial records, and a signed statement alleging fraudulent reporting. The statement was notarized." "By who?" "I can't get the name without a subpoena, but the notary's office is in Lake Oswego." "Lake Oswego, where Vivienne lived." "You think his mother-in-law turned him in?" "I think someone in that family did, and I think we need to find out why." That weekend, I did something I hadn't planned on doing. I drove to Lake Oswego, to the address listed for Vivienne Cross's residence. It was a sprawling estate behind iron gates, the kind of place that required you to announce yourself via intercom. I didn't press the buzzer. Instead, I parked down the street and waited. 2 hours later, a silver Audi pulled out of the driveway. Abigail was driving, alone. She turned onto the main road, and I followed at a distance, feeling ridiculous but unable to stop myself. She drove to a small park overlooking the Willamette River. Parked, got out, and sat on a bench facing the water. After a moment's hesitation, I got out too. She saw me approaching and didn't look surprised. "Yes." And then he started Apex with my mother's money and told her the same lies he told you. That it was an investment, that he had a plan, that everything would work out. But he was still gambling. Smaller amounts, more carefully hidden, but still gambling. Why didn't you just leave him? I tried, twice. Both times he convinced me to stay. Said he was getting help, going to therapy, that he loved me and would change. She finally looked at me. And I believed him because I wanted to. Because admitting I'd married someone like that meant admitting I'd been a fool. So you filed the anonymous tip. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't prove the gambling to anyone. He'd gotten good at hiding it. But I knew the business finances were fraudulent. He was reporting false numbers to avoid taxes, to make the company look more successful than it was, to keep my mother investing. She pulled a folder from her bag and handed it to me. I kept copies of everything. Bank statements showing transfers to gambling sites, credit card bills from casino hotels, text messages with people I don't know about debts and payments, all of it. I opened the folder, page after page of evidence, meticulously organized, dated, annotated. This wasn't just record keeping. This was preparation for war. Why give this to me? Because you deserve to know the truth. Anthony didn't lose your money because a business failed. He lost it because he has a problem he refuses to acknowledge. And when you took him to court, I was glad. I thought maybe finally he'd face real consequences. But then my mother stepped in and paid everything off, and nothing changed. What about the audit? It's real. The state is investigating, and when they finish, they're going to find everything I documented. Anthony will face criminal charges, probably jail time, and my mother will realize she's been funding a lie for 3 years. I closed the folder. You could have just divorced him quietly, taken your evidence and left. I tried, but he's my husband, and despite everything, part of me still hopes he'll wake up and get help. Her voice cracked slightly. Pathetic, right? No, just human. We sat in silence for a while, watching boats drift past on the river. Finally, she spoke again. I'm sorry. For what he did to you. For not stopping him sooner. For everything. It's not your fault. It feels like it is. I stood up. What are you going to do now? Wait for the audit to finish. File for divorce. Try to rebuild something resembling a life. She looked up at me. What about you? I don't know yet. I walked back to my car, the folder under my arm, feeling like I'd just been handed the final piece of a puzzle I didn't know I was solving. Anthony hadn't just betrayed me. He'd betrayed everyone who trusted him, including the woman who'd stood beside him through everything. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and read through Abigail's documentation. Every transaction, every lie, every carefully hidden trip to tribal casinos in Washington and Oregon. The scale of it was staggering. Over 3 years, Anthony had gambled away nearly $200,000. My $50,000 had just been the beginning. I called Jordan and told her everything. This changes the case fundamentally, she said. If you want, we could file a fraud claim. Argue that the entire loan was obtained under false pretenses. It might not get you more money, but it would create a public record of what he did. Would it help Abigail in the divorce? Absolutely. This kind of documentation is gold in family court. Then let's do it, not for me, for her. You're a better person than most people would be in this situation, Samuel. I wasn't sure about that. But I knew one thing. The money I'd fought for, the $72,000 sitting in my account, had never really been about the amount. It had been about forcing Anthony to acknowledge what he'd done, to face consequences, to be held accountable. And now I knew the full truth. He hadn't just stolen from me. He destroyed himself, piece by piece, bet by bet, lie by lie. And somehow, that was sadder than anything else. The state audit took 6 weeks to complete. When the findings came back, they were worse than anyone expected. Anthony had underreported income by over $300,000 across 3 years. The penalties and back taxes totaled nearly $450,000. Apex Ventures was immediately dissolved, its assets seized by the state. The penthouse went into foreclosure. The luxury car was repossessed. Within 2 months, Anthony had lost everything. I heard about it through Jordan, who heard it from colleagues in the legal community. Apparently, it had become something of a cautionary tale in Portland business circles. The young entrepreneur who'd built success on lies and lost it all when the truth caught up. I felt no satisfaction hearing it, just a dull, distant sadness. Abigail filed for divorce 3 days after the audit results were published. The proceedings were swift and uncontested. She kept what little remained of her own assets. Anthony walked away with nothing but debt and a criminal investigation hanging over him. Vivienne, I heard, had cut him off completely. No more bailouts, no more legal defense funds, no more family safety net. She'd invested nearly $500,000 in a man who'd lied to her daughter and gambled it all away. That kind of betrayal didn't get forgiven in families like hers. On a cold morning in late autumn, I got a text from an unknown number. "Can we meet? One last time. I need to tell you something, Anthony." I almost deleted it. I'd moved on. Or tried to. Started seeing someone. A teacher named Hannah Clark I'd met at a bookstore. Started therapy to work through the anger and resentment I'd carried for so long. Started imagining a future that wasn't defined by what my brother had taken from me. But something made me respond. When and where? Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Laurelhurst Park, near the pond. The next morning was gray and drizzling, typical Portland autumn weather. I found Anthony sitting on a bench overlooking the water, wearing a jacket that had seen better days, his face thinner than I remembered, hollow-eyed and worn. I sat down, keeping distance between us. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly. I didn't respond, just waited. "I'm leaving Portland," he continued. "Moving to Seattle. Got a job in logistics, entry level, nothing special, starting over." Good. I also started going to meetings, Gamblers Anonymous, 3 times a week, got a sponsor, the whole thing. He looked at me. "I know it doesn't fix what I did, but I needed you to know I'm trying." "Why tell me?" "Because you deserved better than the brother I was. And I want you to know that losing everything, it woke me up. Finally. After years of lying and hiding and pretending, I finally hit bottom hard enough that I couldn't ignore it anymore." He pulled an envelope from his pocket. "This is for you." I took it, opened it. Inside was a check for $5,000. "It's not much," Anthony said, "but it's what I could save from my last few paychecks. I know I owe you more, morally if not legally. This is just a start. I'll send more when I can." I stared at the check. "You don't owe me anything anymore. The settlement covered the debt." "The legal debt, yeah, but not the real one. Not the trust I broke. The years I stole from you. The relationship I destroyed." His voice cracked. "I can't fix that with money. I know that. But I have to try to make amends somehow." I folded the check and put it back in the envelope. Then I handed it back to him. "Keep it. Use it for your recovery. Get yourself stable in Seattle. That's the only amends I need." He looked at me, confused. "Samuel, I spent 3 years angry at you," I said. 3 years fighting to get back what you took. And I won. I got the money, got the judgment, watched you lose everything. And none of it made me feel better. None of it gave me back what I really lost, which was a brother I could trust. I stood up. "You getting help, actually dealing with your addiction, that's worth more than any check. So do that. Get better. Build a real life this time." "Can we ever be brothers again?" he asked quietly. I thought about that. "I don't know. Maybe someday. But not today." He nodded, understanding. "Fair enough." I walked away from that bench, from my brother, from the years of anger and resentment and betrayal. The rain had picked up, soaking through my jacket, but I didn't care. My phone buzzed. A text from Hannah. "Coffee later? Want to hear about your morning?" I smiled and typed back, "Yeah, I'd like that." That evening I took the folder Abigail had given me, all the evidence of Anthony's gambling and lies, and fed it page by page into my apartment's fireplace. I didn't need it anymore. The truth was out. Justice had been served, and holding on to the documentation felt like holding on to the anger. I watched the papers curl and blacken, the ink running, the evidence of betrayal turning to ash. Somewhere in Seattle, my brother was starting over. Somewhere in Lake Oswego, Abigail was rebuilding her life. Somewhere in Portland, Vivienne was learning that money couldn't protect people from themselves. And I was here, finally free of the weight I'd carried for so long. The last page burned away and I closed the fireplace screen. My apartment felt warmer, lighter, like something that had been pressing down on the walls had finally lifted. I didn't forgive Anthony, not completely, maybe not ever, but I let go of the need for him to suffer more than he already had. Let go of the fantasy that his destruction would somehow restore what I'd lost. Because the truth was simpler than that. I hadn't lost anything that mattered, the money was just money. What mattered was that I'd fought for myself when it would have been easier to walk away. And I'd stood up, demanded accountability, and refused to let someone else's weakness define my worth. That was the real victory. Not the judgment, not the payment, but the knowledge that I was stronger than I'd thought. I grabbed my keys and headed out to meet Hannah. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets wet and gleaming under the streetlights. The city felt new somehow, full of possibility instead of ghosts. Behind me, the fire burned low and quiet, turning the past to smoke and ash. And ahead, the future waited, unmarked and open, ready to be written. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.